Hey everyone, welcome to the next episode for Mandalorian Season 3, Episode 2 breakdown. Uh it's a pretty good episode. The episode was The Mines of Mandalore. So we want to get into the breakdown. Basically the episode starts out with um them on, was it Tatooine?
Yes.
Yeah.
Most likely.
She goes to Tatooine during when they're having that festival.
Well, it starts at Tatooine, yeah, because it's
Yeah.
got come on, what was her name?
Mechanic chick. I don't
Yeah.
bother with her name. It's something like Pele it starts with a P, but
I had it written
Pel
down and
something.
I totally left it at work. Hold on.
I
What?
just know I just know that man, she's annoying as hell.
Did you
I know
notice that
she's
something happened between when we last saw her and this one because she's missing the big old gap in her teeth?
She probably got
Somebody
by
popped
somebody
her,
she was
or she
swindling.
more she popped somebody.
Uh,
She's a fighter.
Pelimoto.
Pelimoto. Yeah,
Pelham.
yeah, there we go. Yeah, so basically it starts out with her basically talking to a Rhodian about trying to get his speeder bike or not speeder bike, but speeder.
It was Speeder. It was a Lance.
Of course, as soon as she like cons him into paying more money for it, Jawas show up with the parts stolen from the vehicle. So she's
Right.
totally swindling.
So
Uh,
you notice now that they've gone back. They've gone from, um, they've got more entrepreneurial. They've gone from finding them and stripping them off of wrecked ships and all that to doing what like they did to Obi-Wan.
oh
If you're going
yeah,
to steal something from me, you might as well clean it before you bring it back. If you're going to sell
yeah.
and then sell it to me, you might as well clean it. I was like, okay, there's another throwback that shows you that the Jawas have even changed.
Change their business practices. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why, whenever we see R5, I still think that that's the same R5 that basically broke that Luke and
Hey,
Owen didn't
it
purchase.
is. It's supposed to be.
And
There was a an argument between uh, one of the people on the show and Filoni about. He goes, "That's him," and he never got off of Tatooine. And Filoni was like, "But no, he there was another one that was running around. Maybe he got brought back." And it was funny watching them argue with each other when they know what they decide. They wrote it. They have to know
yeah,
what they were doing.
well, it's one of those things that's funny because through the episode, you can definitely tell that his motivator is broken. So he's
Broken, yeah,
not wanting to, he's not motivated to do anything. He's cautious to go on the journey. He's cautious to go in the cave. At this point, Mando shows up or Din with Grogu,
yeah, yeah.
and they have the reunite, the reunite with her,
Yep.
and
And
she
he
mentions the whole thing of
there's a whole other hint back to his time training with Luke.
Yeah, more backstory.
yeah.
Yep. In one jump, they did a bunch more backstory just by having Grogu leap into the air and do that somersault into her
Now,
arms.
did he leap in somersault or was he yeeted out of that thing? Because
No, he did
No,
it.
I made a list of things as they were happening, and I wrote
That
down
was
because it looked like he just got chucked out there.
no, that was him. They were attempting to add into that whole thing about where they say he trained with Luke for 2 years,
yeah.
and so they said that in the show they wrote a lot of little things that you're going to see people who've their personality changed, their appearance changed. You're going to find out that he is much more powerful in the Force, and that is supposed to be what happened the 2 years that he was supposedly with Luke.
Mhm.
Um,
So, and at this point, he's talking about asking her, if she knows anywhere he could find the parts for an IG unit, the memory unit, and everything. She's like, those are so rare that you're not going to be able to find one, let alone here on Tatooine.
because they were old
Yes,
when they first appeared in
they were
the
part of the
very
Clone Wars.
first
They were,
the Clone Wars. Well, not even that. I mean, if you go back to just when in Empire Strikes Back, when he calls the bounty hunters, IG-88 is an old.
yeah, mold
Uh,
version of it. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. She convinces him to take the droid because it's here. She's going to clean him up and then repair him. And it was
yeah.
funny that she was all patting him and like part of him fell apart.
And she gave him an oil bath like C-3PO got.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So, and another thing too, Dad, was the fact that we had during this time, there's the pod racing that's going on and the celebration on
Right.
Tatooine
That's
or Mos
which
Eisley.
is the celebration. I can't remember. It starts another word that starts with a P, and it goes back to when there was a Hutt who had become so infamous in this part of the galaxy that he people referred to him as a god.
She modifies the ship to allow the astromech to be able to sit where it was supposed to, and then she modified it to
Remodified it.
yeah, remodified it.
Remodified it,
Because it had it, she took it out so that Grogu had a spot, and then she put it back.
So,
which then makes Grogu happy because now he gets to sit in the lap. You know, it's like your kids; they always want to ride in your lap when you're driving. And Grogu's like, I get to. Yeah. Next thing you know, he'll be driving it, pushing all the buttons, and Dan will just be sleeping.
what I love to see is a schematic of how his pod fits in there, where that's at. It has to be under the foot compartment of the Naboo fighter.
But it has to be accessible by Grogu because he tells him, go get in your thing, because he knows that once he opens the thing, he's going to decompress the cabin.
Yeah.
So and then it had to be close enough because when he did shut it, you heard it repressurize, and then all of a sudden he pops up and he's looking. So it can't be too far away from where he was, but there's not a whole lot of leg space in there.
So which brings a question: had he got IG-11 built, where would he fit inside?
I think he would have got another ship. There is no way. Was he going to?
He's going to tie him standing up.
He's going to strap him to the roof like a deer. You know,
he really needs to get a new ship. Like the Naboo fighter's cool and all, but I mean, at the end of the day, he's eventually going to go back to bounty hunting, right?
Yeah, I mean, you would think.
Assuming that certain things don't work out, he wants to have his fallback plan of doing what he's always done. And
bounty hunting.
I'm sure you can bounty hunt in a Naboo fighter, but like whenever the bounty is no longer dead, whenever the bounty is no longer dead or alive, and it's
just going to become dead. It's not going to be dead or alive anymore. He might say, okay, I'll bring him back dead or alive. But in his mind, he's like, I'm going to cap him. I'm going to strap him to the front of the Naboo fighter, a couple of ropes tied around him. And then you'll see him pull like into a space truck stop and go in to get a drink. And then people will be coming out looking at him.
But how many hyperspace whales is he going to be feeding when, that one time he forgets to tie down the corpse tight enough and it just breaks loose and flies off into hyperspace? It's like, no. I at some point he's got to go back to something with a little bit more, because then Grogu is going to be a growing boy, right? What happens when he hits his teenage years and he starts like screwing with Mando while he's trying to fly the fighter? It's like at some point you got to give the kids some space.
Well, and think about it. Since Boba Fett's not going anywhere and not using Slave One anymore, I'd be going. I helped you. Hook me up, man.
Okay, now I gave you your armor. Can you give me your ship? I'll give you this one. It'll be fine.
Well,
and it's perfect because you're not taking anybody anywhere. You just.
Well, here's two things that could be cool: is that we know that there's parts of Mandalore that are maybe still intact somewhere underneath the planet. He could find a fighter there that is large enough that he could take over and get repaired. But I was making.
I don't know, man.
But if they use the weapon that I think they used, even their ships would be destroyed.
Right. So
some tech that big either would have been destroyed whenever Mandalore was razed to the ground, or I would imagine it would have been stripped apart by whatever raiding parties that were going through there at the time, right? It's like
when the Morlocks came out from underground and started attacking and dragging people underground to eat.
Thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, man, that was the best thing in the episode, man. I loved that thing.
So we'll get into that. Let me make this other joke, is the fact that it's like, okay, so what's going to happen? Is he going to become Spike Spiegel, the Mandalorian, with his swordfish within it?
Spike had the bebop though.
Yeah,
Spike had the bebop. He didn't just troll around everywhere.
I think Jet would have an argument. You're just living in my bebop. This is my ship.
No, but Jet had Hammerhead. Jet had a hand
They
in
each
it.
had their own individual, ship.
So,
They had
okay.
and then they all landed and were stored in the Bebop. So
So
again, at some point,
Carl
he's got to
Weathers.
get that bigger space.
So Carl Weathers is
Now, I
gonna
want to see Carl
he's
Weathers
got to
come
be
in,
Jet,
and he's
right?
like on one of land speeder, because he's never going to leave the planet,
No,
and it's just all decked out like a Cadillac with chandeliers hanging from it, from like Escape from New York, because he's a number one.
he's the Duke.
He's the Duke.
He's the Duke of Navarro. A number one. Anyway,
He's going to describe his driving it as all in the hips.
Rocky reference.
okay.
No,
So
Happy Gilmore reference.
Gilmore.
Yeah, Gilmore.
Yeah.
All right, so after she does the modifications, they end up going to Mandalore. Key thing here, which was really good on the storytelling, would have been the fact that Mando teaching Grogu the star coordinates. So
Yes.
what planets is where, where he grew up, giving him history about the man, and also the fact that he sat there and when he was telling him that our history,
Yeah,
not
our history.
my
Yeah,
history.
he's
Like,
well, everybody's calling him his daddy now, so
Right.
that it's. And I really like that they brought in two of the moons that played a big role
right
in the other stories, and including in Clone Wars and everything else.
right.
But they didn't bring up the one moon that got destroyed. I think since they were going to show Mandalore just decimated, there was no point in having a half moon floating around up there somewhere.
Well, and by the time the fact of how long it's been, most of those rocks, asteroids,
Have probably been pulled in to the planet. Yeah,
but Bo points out it hadn't been that long.
No, yeah.
Well, considering the fact of how old Bo is at this point, I mean, she's probably pushing like what, 50, maybe 60.
She looks awful good for 50.
I'm sorry, what?
She was
now. Remember, she was
in the Clone
the
Wars.
sister. She was in the Clone Wars. She was.
Wars.
Her sister was the
Rebels?
one that Obi-Wan hooked up with. That may be the one who is Rey's mother, if they ever get around to that.
She was a teen during the Clone Wars cartoon. And then she was in her mid to late 20s. Or no,
she was older than that when she was
almost, she's probably close to her 30s.
In her 30s when she did Rebels. Yep.
And then now,
remember, she was she ruled, and she was the pacifist. And remember her sister was the pacifist that led to Maul taking over the Mandalorians, Darth Maul. And for short period she did rule them, and then something else happened. I don't remember. I doubt they're going to get all this lore into the show, but
no.
Well, there was a lot dumped in this episode.
The Easter eggs were just like all pointing to all these different events,
right?
And I don't know if anybody caught on that the planet was turned to glass. That those rocks looked less like rock. That's the intense heat. That whatever they did, man, just
a nuclear bomb drop there.
Yeah,
it was black glass.
So when they enter the planet, you see how there's electrical storms going throughout the planet,
which messed up the
magnetic pull
of
the planet, which is disrupting any kind of certain electronics, radar, stuff like that, communications outside the planet.
Because if, like he said, if something bad would happen, you were literally on your own, especially if nobody knew where you were.
And that was very foretelling, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. So they land. He sends R5 in to go and test the levels to see if the planet's full of oxygen or is toxic and stuff like that.
Okay, and I got to say something. Why the hell didn't that happen before? When I'm seeing that, I'm like, you mean to tell me that nobody thought to send a droid just to test the atmosphere and see if there's any radiation or any side effects? That he's the one who's going to be the one who does it?
Well, considering we know that other people had been to the planet.
Yes, we did.
He had the piece of the glass
So,
to the armor.
but that raises the question, right? If some random rogue dude went down to Mandalore and came back with a chunk of it, how is that? How is there not just like people all over that thing wanting
Yeah,
to go down
especially
there
if
and
you've
strip
got like
mine?
protective suits, if you got, if you remember the stormtroopers originally in Lucas's story they fought in space. They were space warriors. Their suits were pressurized. They weren't just helmets that you took off.
Yeah,
So I
sure.
love the science in this because you just put it on. You don't have any connective tissue here, and all of a sudden you hear Mando's helmet pressurized. You
Right.
hear, but you never hear when a
Oh,
stormtrooper takes his
but
off it pressurizing.
yeah,
Wait,
but so
wait.
we found out there's atmosphere there. So again, how is it like what y'all pointed out? How is Mando the first? Mando's not the first one that knows this,
No.
right?
No,
This other
no.
guy went down there and found it. So who else has been down there? What else has been strip mined? Why is it this? Why is it still this weird common knowledge makes everyone that Mandalore is this inhabitable, cursed, poisoned place when
It revolves
random
around the
traders have been there?
religious thing that I'll bring up a little bit later and kind of explain what I think's going on, and we'll see. The other things is Bo-Katan was really sure that it wasn't poisoned.
Correct.
So, but
She never had enough courage to go down
to
there.
go down there because she saw the damage from the surface. So that, wives' tales and things told to different people can grow. So if the first few people start saying it's inhabitable, and then that's going to spread, it's going to become this big thing, and only the bravest. But there are a lot of scavengers. There are people who make their living going into civilizations in this universe and just mining what's left.
Or
So
hazardous environments. Yeah.
environments, somebody would have to.
Why couldn't R5 be able to do that once they were in the atmosphere of the planet? He should have been able to instantly tell the readings of what was what.
Well,
in the ship.
you actually have to go and take different readings everywhere, and it took them a while to put it all together and analyze it.
Right.
So if you're going to go into a cave and go towards the mines, you're going to want to know what the air is like on the outside and what it's like on the inside of the cave.
Right. So going in, R5 goes in. Of course, then they lose contact. So of course, Din.
Grogu did it. Grogu's like, and okay, kid, I'll go in there and look.
Yeah.
Just hush.
Well, because he had taken a liking to the droid. What can you expect?
He took a
was almost
liking
the
to the
shortest
little guy
cameo.
in the first one.
Well,
He's going to be the kid who brings pets home all the time.
Right, and then eats them. I'm pretty sure I would be pretty upset though, having my bed or my lookout tower taken away from me by some droid. Of course, then goes in, gets ambushed by Morlocks. Of course, they have other names. We don't know what they are yet.
They're straight up Morlocks.
I was like, oh wow. So civil. I know my first thought were some people of the Mandalorians have mutated with the
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
out and living in the caves, but
Yeah, because whenever they were first walking, like whenever he first went into the underground, right? So here I am, I'm thinking of this weird washed out wasteland, walking into what looks like kind of a cavernous area, and then underneath it is where the city is. I get that might not be the actual layout because you could still see the city from above, but I was definitely getting, and especially with the fact that the entrance into the atmosphere was very much Prometheus, right? I was getting
Yes.
a lot. I was getting a lot of Mountains of Madness vibes with at least that aspect of them coming up into there, and then you introduce the Morlocks to it, right? So there was a little mix and match of
different genres, different
going on.
stories. Yeah,
yeah. And
yeah,
that's
and
one
then
thing, there's a lot of that in this episode. There's a lot of references
to
homages
yeah,
to things that were going on from other fiction.
other fiction. Yep.
But all right, so he gets ambushed. He pulls out the dark saber. Of course, he's still struggling to be able to utilize it, and is able to take them all out without being getting too much damage done to him. But and then he picks up R5, and then they head back. They do the reading. Of course, there's oxygen. it's breathable. So they head in with him and so Mando and Grogu head in to explore the underground cavern looking for the waters, the fountain.
I was like, okay, are we going to see tentacles come up out of the water and one of them get dragged in? Are we going to do a Lord of the Rings thing here? And they
Well,
didn't.
it clearly went with that, right? When Bo walked through and lifted up that little orb and illuminated it,
yeah.
and then they were walking through and it was just the big empty things. I was like, and the Mines of Mandalore, right? It's just Mines of, and then an M word. It's like Moria, and it definitely was feeling that way because they came up. What did the mines look like? It was a massive door, taller than anything. Like there's no mechanical instruments that tall that need to go through that door to get down in there. But that's the way it looks because it's just aesthetically pleasing, right?
Yeah, it looks like a dwarven mine.
Well, you know what? I think some of it was because why would the ceremonial area be at the back of the mine? So I think that door, the one, because you look at the arches, how they come up and do this ornate look. If it was a regular mine, you just have reinforced things to keep everything from falling on your head. There, it looked like that was a chamber that was built into an old mine and probably fixed up so they could go down to that water. And that's where all those ceremonies were. You know, they even put a plaque on the friggin' wall for it to commemorate what it was.
Well, so from what I was reading, is that the first area they fall into, that's supposed to be the sewers, and that's supposed to be where Ahsoka and Darth Maul fought the last episode of.
But the sewer pipes were a lot smaller than what they were in the seventh season of.
Well, and then you got to think
the Clone Wars.
All of the stuff compacting everything could have made things.
Oh yeah, I know.
And then I know that from what I heard is that whenever they go into the room and they find like the all the different pieces from the Mandalorians and everything, and Din grabs the helmet, that's supposed to be the blacksmith room where they were making different armor.
And see, I got something different from that because I just recently watched I think it's the first two episodes of the fourth season of Rebels because I'm just kind of rewatching them again to try to catch all this stuff that they're throwing at us. And the reason why Sabine left, whatever, left was because she created a weapon that was supposed to protect Mandalore, and the Empire took it and used it against them. And so at the end of the first episode of first episode in the fourth season, they're trying to save her father. They're doing all this stuff to rescue him, and they split their forces. And the mother, and I can't remember if it's her brother or a close friend, their forces are supposed to keep the Empire off of them while they go and chase the troop transports that are carrying her father. And she hears the weapon being fired when she's talking to her, because they're all like saying, where are the dead bodies? Where are the people who fought here? There's nobody here but the losers. So that meant whoever they fought, and if it was the Empire, they took their bodies out after, or they were disintegrated. Well, when she hears that weapon fire, she knows. You see it in her face, and then her dad says that's the weapon she created. And so when they got there, the damage that you see, and it looks identical to what we saw in that cave. So are they still using the weapon? And was that the weapon that eventually became the weapon of the Death Star? Right. And that's going to change where all that technology came from because it was originally designed by somebody else. And when she walks over and she shakes her mother's helmet out of the dust of the burnt flesh, and this weapon was so powerful it burnt through the armor of Mandalorian armor, just like it was butter. She picks up the helmet, and it looks just like the helmet, and they pick it up very similar to how Din picks up the helmet. And you look at them, they're both that scorched, the metal is warped, the glass is gone. And so I was like, I think that this was like a throwback to that, to make that look that way. And I'm just wondering if they're going to eventually, because they've shortened Andor. Andor was originally going to be 3 seasons long, from what I read. Some people said 5, but now they're going to do it all in 2. That means next season there's a lot that's got to happen in, between, to keep that in sync with Rogue One.
Well, there's got to be
And
definitely a time jump too, because
yeah, and then we saw them building the parts of the Death Star.
Yeah.
And a couple of times they've showed a weapon hanging underneath Star Destroyers, the big ones, that looks an awful like a miniature version of the Death Star weapon. So I'm just wondering if they're building this little path that's going to come back around, and we're going to find out that it was based off of her weapon.
Okay.
So
of
I'm
course,
just making a couple of connected
no, it's fine.
thoughts there.
One of the other things of course, when he picks up the helmet, we find out it's a trap, and he gets trapped by at the time we see it,
spider.
Yeah, a giant robot spider, a crab, which we've seen some of these designs in games and other previous media. It basically traps him in like some kind of cage and then takes him off. Grogu follows him. Then you find out when it stops that this thing comes out of it, another creature, robotic creature, which is very much Grievous type technology.
Yep.
Because there's an eye within the single eye unit that looks.
It's somebody's eye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
and it also looks like there's other tissue. When they do that one side view, there looks like there's not just the head, there's other tissue connected to it. I got the same feeling as you did. I was like, okay, this is to me Grievous, and since Grievous was old, his story is much older, than even Luke's. This technology has been around for a while, and this guy, we don't know how old this guy is.
Right. And it was kind of reminding me of a Genoshan a little bit. Plus the fact that he had the staffs that Grievous's bodyguards had.
Yeah. Which were designed to fight Jedi. They were
yeah. So when he leaves, Grogu comes up trying to use the Force to rip Din out of the cage. That doesn't work, which alerts the droid. The droid
Cyborg.
Cyborg comes to try to attack him, and then Din tells him to go and get Bo-Katan. And then he goes and gets the ship, tells R5 where he wants to go. He flies to her planet. Whenever he's showing up, Bo-Katan thinks that he's coming back, and it's like, I'm going to get rid of him once and for all.
For all, yeah. I think it's a constant reminder of her failure, because if you look at the history of the people who've had the Black Saber, the original guy was actually one of the first Mandalorian Jedis. You see on the throne around her, there's hieroglyphs in the walls, and you see him fighting with it, and that's supposed to be him, the guy who created that. And then somehow that ends up becoming part of the legend that whoever owns that will lead. But, and okay, we're going to go into Harry Potter now. We're talking about how it interconnects. You get the feeling from the different stories and what has been said just in this series alone that if you are, the only way you can own the dark saber is by defeating the person who owned it, and then it's supposed to be yours, and then you can use that freely. If not, you struggle with it. It's heavy. But like we talked about, I think that's just kind of a myth built up around it. But it's a myth that's based on different things, because Bo-Katan got it, and she it was given to her by Sabine, who Sabine actually fought somebody and should have had it because Maul actually won it and she fought Maul. It should have gone to her. I'm like, okay, so here's the whole Elder One thing going on here. Then the Maul was defeated and then she took it back and then she failed to unite the people. And then somebody else got it and they failed to unite it and it ended up being Gideon took it from her. And he ended up being a bad guy. He just certainly didn't unite the Mandalorian with it. And then Din beat him and took it from him. And is he going to be the one that unites the Mandalorian, brings them all back together, all the tribes that have been scattered throughout the universe? Or is he going to? He's not really the real owner, you know. It's gonna. I would like to sit down. I was trying to do it until I started rebuilding my computer today. Was map out that lineage to see, because that's something that happens in Star Wars a lot. You know, Qui-Gon Jinn was trained by Dooku, and Dooku was trained by Yoda, and Yoda was trained by another one, and each one it becomes a great Jedi, and then their apprentice becomes a traitor or turns to the dark side, and then it's just this progression of up and down, one good, one bad, one good, one bad, one good, one bad, you know. So and then Obi-Wan was trained by Qui-Gon. He trains Anakin. Anakin turns bad. Anakin has a son who's Luke. Luke is able to overcome it. So when they're writing it, I always think, okay, are they trying to do this? Are they trying to, because there's a lot of twins born in the whole Skywalker family and that whole story. Because Jason Jacin, which are Han and Leia's actual children, were twins. The third child, was a single born child. But then, Luke doesn't have twins. He only has one child, right? Which is Ben, the one he names Ben. So, I mean, there's a lot of coincidences throughout the history of Star Wars. I mean, I don't mean coincidence cycles.
But for what's going on, you can definitely tell that there's parallels between the
parallels is the word I'm looking at.
Mandalore and Din. So they're almost setting up Din to take that path. And it's kind of like that whole thing with the Matrix in the original movie. Remember, you can't be the one. You just have to know you are the one.
The one. Yeah.
It's not like you can't be told. So, and that's the thing is that, yes, every person who wields the Darksaber, who has wielded the Darksaber, has an understanding and belief in themselves of what they're doing. Din is constantly battling his place.
His doubt is and his questioning. So that affects his ability to use that. Because remember when Sabine got it, she had to be trained by Keenan. And she struggled with it and he kept trying to tell her you can't control it. You can't bend it to your will. You have to focus on it and allow it to guide you. Where you saw Bo-Katan, man, she was kicking butt with that thing, and it didn't seem like it weighed anything. Yeah. And then every time we've seen Din use it, the more he uses it, it gets heavier and harder for him to use.
Yeah. Well, because it's unfamiliar. It's easier for him to use his blaster.
But it gets heavier. Even if it were the same weight every time.
No, but that's the thing.
Then he would be able to use it. He takes two swings with it, and all of a sudden he's dragging it like it's a giant bastard sword.
It's unfamiliar to him. So if it was one thing where he had a common knowledge of understanding of what the tools he's using, he would be more efficient. Because this is something that he doesn't know, and it's something that we've noticed throughout this series, is that when he doesn't know what he's doing, he gets hurt more often. Yeah. He's unsuccessful. He has other people that help refocus him. And then once he has that focus, there's nothing that stops him. So, and that's the thing, is that we're at this point right now with this episode that possibly we're at a turning point where we're going to start seeing him move forward.
Right. And one thing I
but
wanted to say was that we saw them in this one, Bo-Katan and Din working together in a friendly manner.
Correct.
But what happens, because she believes bloodlines are where leadership comes from. Din is more following their religious belief, the code, and it's whoever owns it. So are we going to see them go against each other?
No, I don't think so.
You don't think so?
No.
And then I think Grogu, being with him, Grogu might teach him, because Grogu knows how to use a lightsaber. We're going to find that out in a couple, further down in the season. But
Well, and that's the thing. That's the lesson that Luke had to learn. And I want to say this before David goes, is that when Luke was training with Yoda on Dagobah and doing all the stuff about learning how to use the Force and levitation, he couldn't let his mind go when trying to lift the X-wing out.
he was easily distracted. His doubts
or discouraged. And
Yeah.
that's very much Din with this whole situation. So, but go ahead, David.
But
Sorry.
the difference there, right, is the force. The force is force utilization is different than wielding big choppy sword, right? Big choppy sword it's a heavy-handed metaphor, right? That is what the dark saber represents. But that's at the end of the day what it is, because like lightsabers, especially this one, isn't heavy, right? We saw Bo wield it easily without problem. So it's not I don't know how to wield this light sword. It's literally you're getting into the weird metaphysical side of
Right.
Star Wars, where you're getting into the faith space magic-y side of things, where the dark saber is the one ring, right? It is an actual physical burden that Din does not, at his core, want. Right.
Yep.
At the end of the day, that's he doesn't want to lead. He's not a leader. That's not his character. And that's why he can't wield it, because it's a burden that he is unwilling to take on and use.
Yeah,
And
heavy
that's
is
and that's where the frustration is. So yeah, it's like I said, I think it's a little different than Luke's situation, but it's just the metaphor they're using, right?
Right.
Yeah, the whole thing is full of metaphors. I mean, the whole idea that you have Bo-Katan, who is somebody who wants to lead but can't, and you have somebody who doesn't want to lead that could. And destiny, makes, no matter how much you want to fight it, your destiny is going to find you no matter what.
Exactly.
It's fine.
I was watching it and I had to watch it twice. First time I watched it I was like so pulled out. Okay, that's referencing that. And it was just pulling me out. So then I wrote it down, called Vince, bothered him at work, and told him what I was feeling. And then I watched it again to make sure that it didn't change in any way for me. And some of it kind of reinforced what I was believing, and some of it was like, well, maybe they're not going to go that way, because I'm putting my feelings and emotions into what they're doing, and I don't know what they're writing.
Yeah, but I mean, so I guess real quick to the recap through, right? Goes, gets Bo. Bo comes back. She saves him with the dark saber, and then they proceed on to the mine. He goes on to do him washing himself in the water, right? Getting to that scene, because that's the important part. That I would say is the crux of this entire episode. That's where we're starting to get into the meat of this, because like what you and I, whenever we had our very long discussion, when you were questioning about whether or not Bo would be considered an apostate, right?
Apostate, yeah.
And I was saying only by the cult that calls people an apostate by removing their helmet. Because now you're getting into what I think you're getting towards, which is the faith side of it, right? Where Din was conscious and watching Bo fight with the darksaber, right? And clearly being able to handle herself. So now Bo, the idea and the image in his mind, which he already didn't want it, right? He tried to give it over back in season 2, and she wouldn't accept it because that's not how it's given, right? So the big question of this season, based on that little exchange, because it's Din seeing again, I'm not the one who should have this. She is,
Yeah,
right?
she saves
And
him
so now
twice.
the big question is, how do I pass this on? And on Bo's side, and this is where I after watching the second episode and then going back and rewatching the first, I really think the first scene in the first scene in the first episode is trying to set up where I think they're going. And I still think they could have done the first episode better. But it seems like where they're going for is Din's not going to be the one to rule. He's like what you're getting at. He's going to be the one to bring all the different groups together and mend them and then put them underneath the leadership of, it seems like they're going towards Bo at the moment.
Yeah.
Because Bo has her, because this is where like what I was describing, right, was the ruling class had secularized the beliefs of the Mandalorians. There was no mysticism to it. They went out, it was all just a puppetary thing that they would do for the sake of the masses, right? And the children of the way, or whatever the hell Mando's order is called, right? The Order of the Watch.
There's like because there's
right?
like 4 of them. There's the dark ones. I forget what the dark ones. And I know
Bo keeps calling them the Order of the Watch, right? So
yeah, the Order of the Watch.
Right. So with the Watch,
they're watching because they're waiting for the leader to come, the saver, the Messiah.
So it seems like, because then Bo watches as Din, right, who is following through with his faith, right? She's watching this moment. It means something to him. It's important to him, right? Whereas whenever she was a ruler and it was just, oh, this is just the circuses for the masses, now she's getting exposed to the real faith of someone going through this action. And so it's giving her a deeper appreciation of, you know what, it wasn't just this stupid me going and dunking myself in a pool. This actually has meaning to people, and it's important. And so that's where it seems like they're starting to seed the idea of Bo coming to and acknowledging the ways of Mandalore that they have moved away from. And she might not go full dogmatic in the way of the Watch, but at least come closer enough to it to where it will be acceptable to them, right? Because I do think at some point there's going to be a conflict between Bo and whoever she's able to gather herself around and the Order of the Watch at some point. That's the only reason why Din had that conversation with the armor, is because at some point the armor and her crew are going to show up at Mandalore, and there's going to be a conflict.
There's going to be a conflict. Going to rule. And on that same note, in Clone Wars towards the end, and in the first in Rebels, Bo-Katan does not believe, because she can't take the Darksaber. She has to defeat whoever has it and win it in battle. And so that's her hang up. I can't take it from you, because I believe Din would hand it to her in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Din is dealing, and Din, the look on her face when Din recites the same mantra that the little boy did in the first episode, and was, if you go back and you watch the earlier seasons when they have all those flashbacks, and there's a scene where he's kind of doing that when he gets to become the Mando, and then knowing of how the Separatists and Dooku betrayed some of the Mandalorians. He promised to do something if they sided with him in the trade war that started all of Star Wars, and he betrayed them. And so the Mandalorians turned on Dooku and the Separatists. Well, later on, the Separatists take over parts of that area, and they're the ones who invade Mando and kill his parents, that place where they're living. So
real quick to jump in about that mantra, right? So far this season, what we've seen is people need to stop saying it, because the first person that said it summoned a giant turtle alligator thing that tried to eat all the Mandalorians. The second person that said it slipped into a giant hole that sucked him all the way down to the bottom of this
Well, no, he
massive
didn't. No,
chasm.
No, he pulled him down. He
what
pulled him
it
down.
pulled him down. Okay, that's what I was going to say. At the end, you
The
missed a point.
mythosaur.
Not
Yeah.
only did she save him from killer
Yeah,
clowns
she
from
saw
outer
the giant
space,
monster that
who
was
was trying
supposedly
to,
killed by Mandalore
yeah,
from Legend.
yeah.
No, I saw that. I got
when
it.
tried to suck all the. Wait a minute, I'm trying to make a comical thing here. You know,
Oh,
she
sorry.
saves him from the killer clowns from outer space who tried to use a giant straw to suck out his juices. And then when he goes in and he's in his moment and he's like there, you know, he walks and if you look when she dives in, it may be like 10 more steps and he would have fallen into that pit himself.
Yeah.
But the creature reached up and grabbed him and
Pulled
pulled him under, and she dives in and saves him again. And then when she brings him back up, she comes face to face with it. She looks it in the eye, and all of a sudden, all the realities of the stuff that she felt didn't mean anything anymore are there in her face.
Yeah.
Because what the what is her the armorer, when they talk about that, they talked about how, and then other people talk about how the first guy, the first Mandalore, killed one of those. In it, she says, when she's telling Mando the myth, she talks about that whoever becomes the new leader has to go down and fight one of these things again. But they're supposed to be all dead because Mandalore is supposed to be a dead planet. And now we find out they're alive. So that reinforces what she was saying and the religious aspect of this. And now you got Bo-Katan having to question her beliefs. And so, you can't deny something that is standing hundreds of feet above you and you're like the size of its eyeball. And so I think we're going to see this event change both of them in different ways than what we perceive.
Well, he eventually see the thing is though, in this episode, he did complete the quest that was started at the end of season 2. And we're only 2 episodes in.
Yeah.
And now it's where do we go from here? And we've already kind of discussed part of that. Things that you guys liked about the episode.
All of it. This one was one of my favorites, just because it has so much layers in it. Yeah, we talked about this. You know, the first 2 seasons were a cowboy, a western, the bounty hunter, the shootouts, and all that. The second one had more of a season had more of a samurai feel to it, where he was on, like go back to
He was a Ronin.
the Ronin and stuff like that. This one is very, very has a religious undertone to it that I think is just going to carry us there.
Well,
The whole thing of a Messiah. There's the first episode was what was it called?
The Apostate.
Okay, and what is an apostate?
Follower.
It's a religious term of a person who is thrown out because they break a rule or a dogma of a religious group. So he is that. All right, you've got Bo-Katan. Bo-Katan is kind of like Solomon in a way. If you look at her story and you look at the story of Solomon, there are the tribes. They were scattered, and then Moses came in and united them together and brought them.
12 tribes.
So you're going to have Moses, Moses Den coming in and bringing them, but he's not going to be able to stay with them.
Come on, hold on.
Like Moses wasn't able to see the promised land.
So we're in a story that's becoming Battlestar Galactica 2 with Katie.
In a way, there's some of it. Because Battlestar Galactica was all about religion. The original series was.
But I would almost say that this is more in the same vein as like it's a fantasy medieval quest for the Holy Grail kind of type of thing. Because of the fact that of what's going on. They're on a holy quest for their people. Looking for a item, which was the fountain, so that way he could become, which is kind of the Grail was for eternal.
Well, no, the Darksaber's the Grail. right? The dark saber
Darksaber is the Grail.
is the MacGuffin that you need in order to achieve, but they've got it now. And now it's just a matter of, well, who is the right person to use it, right? The whole point of the Grail quest was to take the Grail, bring it back to Arthur so they could be absolved of the sins that were committed, that were driving a wedge between all the knights. So now the quest, what we did is we started on a quest to get the Grail, but we don't have an Arthur yet. We don't know who is Arthur yet. So the question is, who is Arthur to give the Grail to absolve the sins of the Mandalorians and band them back together and fight off whatever's coming, right?
Right, which would be technically, in a way, Din. If
fight off Din?
No, I just don't see Din. I don't see Din becoming the leader. I really don't.
If they go that route, it'll be curious how they handle Bo in that sense, right? Because Din's going to have to go through a serious character change because again, he doesn't want this. He doesn't want this, and he's staring in his face right now is the entire symbol of a person who should take it, right?
But he does want it in the fact of not the leadership, but he wanted to be recognized by his own people again. So he went on this quest to go to this planet that was just completely destroyed, to go down to these waters, to be
absolved of the sin of breaking
It's like a baptism.
Yeah.
And that was the whole other thing the whole thing with with them going into the water, when he was stepping into the water, it reminded me of a baptism. The only thing there wasn't some guy dumping your head in water,
Living waters is a religious term referring to the River Jordan.
Yeah. So, but I mean, the difference is that he was just going there because he got kicked out of his club, right? He got kicked out of the club and he wants back in. And he doesn't want back in because he wants to be in charge. He just wants back in because that's his people, that's his family, that's everything that he knows, right?
I don't know about that, because the fact is that he didn't need those people when he was going on bounty hunting in the first season. He had no attach to him other than the fact that that's the place they, hey, I'm in a secret club, I'm part of a thieves guild and blah, blah, blah. He just used them as a tool. It wasn't until he got more invested in the lore of where he comes from that he kind of wanted to be a part of it. And
but you could tell he was still, and I'm going to use the word indoctrinated, but that's not what I mean. He was in it. That was his religion. That was his Catholicism. Yeah. He just wanted to be his own person.
Right.
But he always came home. He always did what the armorer told him to do. I think what changed him is more the people he met. Just like we do in our life, we get influenced by those people we meet. And going all the way back to what was his IG-11, sacrificing himself to protect Goku and Dan,
So Will dying,
that's the whole point of the sacrifice, is he sacrificed himself so that they could continue. I know that Favreau is a big fan of what's his name, Campbell. I can't never remember his first name. Not Jason
Campbell.
Yeah, just like Lucas was. So in that aspect, that's how they tell their stories, or those heroes' journeys, where you've got Filoni, who is all about the myth and that stuff of Star Wars and the Force and how it's all works. But both of them agree that it's the human drama that carries these stories. And so I liked how they work with each other. Sometimes they fight with each other. I watched them have an argument about whether Luke was actually a Jedi or not, because Filoni believes he did not finish his lessons, so he never could be a real Jedi. But yet Yoda told him in the last story, there's nothing else I can teach you. All I need to teach you, you've learned. You have one last thing for you to do, is to face your father, which is to face your internal. His father represented the darker side that he could be. He had to face his own darkness and overcome it, and he did. So I had to agree with I had to agree with Favreau on that one. I think Filoni was just he got himself in a corner and kept fighting his argument.
The thing is that how much of the stuff is being influenced by other outside forces? We already know that Luke was a Jedi. He became a master. And the thing is that to change that, because there's no other Jedi in the universe. Every Jedi who comes to be that doesn't have the influence of a council, they're the only one. They get to make their own destiny. They get to make the path that goes forward for the next generation. And that's what Luke did. So whether he's a Jedi in the eyes of the Republic from, 40 years ago, that remains to be seen. But for this day and age, at this time with Luke, he is his own master. He is the one who's going to teach what he believes the path the Jedi should be on.
Well, somebody argued with me about Yoda. We're trying to remember how the argument went with, and we were talking about the fact that there are no other Jedi, and that the only two that we know of in the movies. And I was like, okay, you can't take the movie because the movie takes a snapshot of what they're going in. And I tried to say, in war, there's no one battle wins the war. No one person is the winner of the war. There's a lot of little battles and a lot of things that go on. And all we see is the Skywalker part of it. There's a much grander war that was going on. There were other Jedi. Kanan, we found out Kanan was a Jedi.
You have since the Galen Malik is now canon, he was a Sith turned Jedi. You have Kyle Katarn, who's been officially announced.
Yeah.
He's a Jedi, but would become a Jedi at this time with Luke at the Academy. His father was a Jedi. So there's a lot of things that are going on, but the thing is that Luke is the one that has the connection to the original teachings more.
Well, it goes back to that whole thing of prophecy and dogmatic belief. The Jedi fell because they become too dogmatic and it was all about the ceremony and they didn't listen to the Force. And that's proven because Yoda twice is surprised when there's a Sith Lord among them. And when Luke goes before him on his deathbed, and he goes, your dad, he tells you were his dad, unforeseen was, I can't remember what the line is, he did not see that in the Force. So they're not infallible. The Force is not something that instantly gives you what you want. So you get glimpses and it's up to you to figure out what they mean. And usually you had to have an elder or somebody else to help you interpret what those dreams were. But there's a reoccurring thing in Star Wars, and that is they were waiting on a prophesied person who was going to bring balance and to the Force and everything. Anakin came along and he was not what they thought. Luke was actually the one who brought balance. But to bring that balance, they all had to be wiped out. That whole structure had to collapse. Mm-hmm. And what Luke didn't start off from a point where he was raised into that dogma. It's just like somebody who was raised in the church and somebody who wasn't. Somebody who wasn't and comes into the church and has seen a lot of the world, when they come in, their faith seems to be much stronger than people raised in it because they're never tested and they don't want to be tested. So you have this thing here where the Jedi they were stricken the thing, taking kids from their parents when they shouldn't have. They should have had the parents there to help them raise the kids, which builds a positive influence in them, because stripping them from their parents instantly puts fear in a child's heart.
Right.
So you're already introducing the very thing you want to teach them not to allow to control them. And you just see it over and over and over again. And I don't think it was some kind of a plot. I don't think that's what Lucas was trying to do. And you see it picked up on by other writers because, there were so many books within the Star Wars legacy legends. And they all naturally found that equilibrium that told the same type of story over and over again. But it was different each time.
Right. Well, and it
on.
also expanded upon. They understood how the universe worked, how the characters were. They spoke to the writers, so it was just like, here's the set piece. Let the characters do what they're going to do.
Let them tell their own stories.
Without forcing some kind of agenda or whatever. But that's a whole other thing. The thing too that, and just this is a last side note on what we're discussing right here, because I want Colin and David to give their little bitty things
Yeah.
that they liked and just about the story. Then we can do the what we didn't like, and then wrap up the episode. Is the fact that the thing that benefited Luke the most was the fact that Yoda and Obi-Wan had the hindsight to understand that what the Jedi Order was doing is what failed them, which blinded them, which allowed them to teach Luke enough about the ways of the Force that would hopefully give him a better grasp of what he needed to do in the future, instead of relying on the dogmatic parts of the Jedi. The attachments are forbidden and all this other stuff. And that was the thing, is that attachments gave Jedi the strength to continue on. It was because Luke had his friends that he had the strength to fight for them. And, him finding Mara Jade and winning her love and having kids, and then just all the stuff that he did in the EU Legends. And hopefully with what's going on, because I don't know if you guys noticed, this is the second episode that Kylo Ren's mask has been taken out of the intro for Mandalorian. We're possibly going into the right direction with Star Wars, which I feel really great about, which they're going to wipe the sequel trilogy out. But
I don't think they're going to completely wipe it out. Disney spent too much money, too invested in it, and they're just hoping to tell a better story to draw an audience in. Because after all, it is about marketing.
No, but Dad, the thing is that they took Kylo Ren out of that thing. His mask has always been
Yeah.
And this whole season so far, he has not been in here. And with the series for Ahsoka, she can change it. Now, that doesn't mean that it erases it from history, because it's just a new parallel universe because times changed. We'll still get to move in the right direction. You can still have what you had for people that want to.
Well, and two things. One, Anakin, Obi-Wan was trained by Dooku. Dooku, damn it. Qui-Gon Jinn, who was a total different Jedi. He believed in the here and now, not into looking into that you needed to survive here and now. So that's where your focus should be. The living force, as he called it.
Right.
And so that, and Yoda, I think really losing to Palpatine broke Yoda in a way. And having to live on Dagobah, couldn't have been great. But
the exile had enough time on him to be able to think back on what he did.
Yeah.
So it allowed him, because he knew Luke was going to come to him, because that was the original goal, is that one of the twins would come and they would train one of them to hopefully bring balance to the galaxy.
Yeah.
So, but Colin,
we could talk about this for you. I want to hear what they had to say. I'm going to be quiet now.
Well, it was all right. I like the beginning. I like the fact that they gave a little more backstory on Bo-Katan, and I really like seeing her in the armor. That was kind of hot. That's all I got.
Yeah, I think overall it was good, right? It definitely all the people that were saying that this episode was the second part, right, and arguably the most important part of the first episode, I still think that if you take out the rehashing of the armor scene in the first episode, take the meeting of Bo-Katan and Mando and make that the beginning of the series, him going and trying to get Bo to help him go to Mandalore, her seeding in him the idea that, hey, it would be good to have a droid to help you map out, right? Because not knowing what kind of catacombs and things are underneath the surface of Mandalore, and then that would lead him, and then the whole rest of the episode would follow through the way that it does. You end the first episode with him leaving Tatooine, going and then showing up at Mandalore, And if you wrap the first episode right there and then led into this episode with that, I think I would have had a lot less issue with the first episode just because it just felt like it wasted a
I
bunch of
don't.
time.
They should have just kept it one full episode because the first one was short anyway,
Yeah.
and so it could have just been an hour and a half, and that would be a good episode, and that
Yeah.
would have freed up another episode to carry the development. But no, it seems like right now Disney's all about like doing what Warner Brothers is. We got to cut things down, shrink budgets, and all this
Well,
stuff. You know,
well,
so
the money isn't flowing as fast and heavy as it used to in Hollywood, right? So that's part of it. So I mean, outside of that, right? Like that's still quibble about the first episode and how it kind of played into this episode because it's he shows up to Bo, he goes to Mandalore, and then he's immediately back to Bo-Katan. It was like it's so back and forth. I think that if you change, and that's where the Mandalorian's done this since the first season. My headcanon and how time passes makes some of their editing choices with the placement of certain scenes make less sense to me. And if you just modified it just a bit, if you just took this scene and put it over here instead of over there, if you took this episode and moved it over here instead of right here, everything in my head flows a lot better in terms of when things occur. But overall, no, I enjoyed the episode. Like I said, I liked us getting to see because I haven't watched all the animated stuff, so I don't know all the deep lore and history of Mandalore and all this stuff. So getting the little bits and pieces that they gave us in this episode was pretty cool. Getting to see the different creatures and that's one of the cooler things that we need to see more of in Star Wars is an interesting, imaginative, series of creatures thrown at us, not just the same ones over and over, but like the weird spider mech creature and the thing crawling out of it. And then whenever its head detached from its body, and it's like it's
yep,
still
and
going.
that goes back to go on, do it.
That's the thing, though. Like I mean the thing because that scene literally it was just pulled out of the thing as a homage, and you just see it attach it and crawl off. And when you see it crawl off, my first instinct in my head was, "You got to be effing kidding me!"
Right. Yeah, so I mean that was great, and then I'm really curious to see how are they going to resolve the bow problem, right? I mean, if it was just Mando having to learn how to carry the mantle and become the leader, that would be one thing. But you've got this they've added this extra interesting wrinkle of what does Din do about Bo and what does Bo do about Din, and clearly right? It seems like what they're setting up is the two of them are going to be interacting a lot with each other. And watch, I'm saying this in the very next episode.
Yeah, they're gonna
but we're saying all this, but watch the very next episode. They're going to split the party up, right?
Well, and see, I there's only 6. How many or 8 episodes? There's 8 episodes, right?
So there's 6 episodes left now. So
okay, so
too much of a time frame to. We're down to the point where these next 6 episodes have to be core story. There cannot be side.
But there is going to be because we already know that they actually go to a planet where they're attacking the Empire, and it's a conjunction of 3 different groups. The one thing they've done in Mandalorian is introduce the characters that are going to get their own shows. They did it with Ahsoka and everything else. Ahsoka's is a done deal. There were certain things that Favreau was able to save. One, because in August they take over all the production of all the shows. They won't be head of Lucasfilms, but all the Star Wars stuff. And there were certain things to get Favreau to stay on after Kennedy made him so mad was that the shows that they had plotted out and done were going to get made. So will we see Mace Windu? I don't know. I believe we will see an Ahsoka. They might roll Mace Windu into that. We might see Mace Windu rolled into the 4th season of Mando. But they're using this season to introduce the skeleton crew. towards the end. And Skeleton Crew was already supposed to be out. So the timing is off because they delayed Skeleton Crew.
Yeah.
So now are they going to take that out? I don't know. That was a lot of money they spent on footage. They're going to want to use it at some point. Just we're going to have to wait and see. But I know that towards the end of this, there was supposed to be a total different place than where they are right now. And I'm like, so are we going to get resolution within the next 2 episodes of this to allow him to go off? Or is this going to be where they kind of break off for a moment and he's going to go off to do something and then runs into this other group? I don't know. We'll see.
I don't know. That's what I said.
But
That's the interesting thing that is going into this is how are they going to resolve that, and I guess also how is the watch going to play into it, right? Because like I said in our very long discussion, is I don't see the watch pulling a coup. Up until now, they just seem like they're reactive with everything, right? They don't seem very proactive. So yeah, I guess the change, right, of what's going on, they might try to pull a play, but I have a hard time seeing it.
well, I mean, if you look at like the Three Musketeers, Richelieu ran France. He was the cardinal.
Yeah.
Okay. There was a king, there was a queen. He was the power behind it. So I get a feeling that the armorer might not want to be the leader, but she is really pushing Din to go and do these things because I think she sees him as the prophesied Messiah in their group because they're much more religious in their dogma than Bo-Katan. And like we've talked about that. So I think they're putting all that weight into propping him up and moving him into a direction that he might not want to be. Um, and then have power behind the scene.
Yeah, I guess
Advisors.
I guess the show just hasn't shown that side of the. I mean, there's always the chance that she pulls a last minute heel turn, right? Of as it goes along, maybe Jon Favreau's character attacking Din and Boba Fett was partially orchestrated because of the fact that he was being resistant to taking on the leadership role, right? That could be the play that we
I don't
haven't seen.
I don't even think it's a con. I think it is the same thing that we will take a someone who fits a preconceived idea of something and then elevate them up, and we start looking for the miracles. We start looking for all the things that fit into what we wanted. You see what you want to see.
Right.
And so she might not be evil. She wants to bring around the Mandalorians back to where they were, but that doesn't mean her decisions are sound or good for the people. You know, villains aren't just always malevolent. They are, sometimes they believe they're the good guys.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
What if she's also working for Thrawn? Because we know he's going to be.
Yeah, he's coming back, but that all got moved to season 4. We're not going to see. We might see Thrawn and Ezra show up towards the end of it, like we saw Luke show up in the other one. I don't know. There was just so much that was filmed, and then all this stuff put everything on shelves. So I don't know what they're going to do. Luke was supposed to be looking for a Jedi temple on this planet while the Empire is fighting there, and the kid and what's his name, Jude Law's character is trying to rescue all these kids. But he finds that the Empire was using. They were going to send him in a train to become dark, whatever those Inquisitors and all that other stuff that Emperor surrounded himself with. And then you had Ahsoka coming to look for Luke, and then Din Djarin and Grogu appearing at the same time, and they all coming from a different ring, and all their stories converge. And then we were going to get this big reveal, and then they were going to have to split up to go keep fighting. Will that make it in anymore? I don't know.
It may. I mean, he doesn't have, KK stopping him from what's going on. So,
No,
but
budgets are now stopping them.
well, and that's where one of my complaints for this episode was I love the whole thing of it being in a mine and dark, but I felt it was a little too dark. There was not enough light. You would think that there would be fungus or something that has luminescence that
Yeah.
would be lighting the path instead of having to have, Bo-Katan pull out the energy light ball that she had, like she was Frieza pulling out the moon, and we have to worry about Saiyans turning into monkeys. Sorry, no, but there was a lot of things that could have been added to this episode that I wonder were taken out just because of the fact of budget. We
So
may have been in because we don't know when they were in post production trying to get all the CGI work done that the decision was made to start cutting things because of how bad things are going within Disney because of the failings of Marvel with their movies and Star Wars and everything else that they got going on they're doing as well.
I think they know they're in trouble. I financially because they're cutting back on the Marvel stuff. They're cut way back on the Star Wars stuff, and then if Indiana Jones were to be good, it could just save them. They would have enough money to put everything back in line. But I have a feeling they know it's not going to be good, and they're trying to cushion to
The
build up
fall.
the fall. Um,
And that's sad that because we know that Iger didn't like, but Iger and Chapek did not like the ending of that was filmed for the movie, and they've been doing all those reshoots.
Reshoots, yeah.
How much of that is going to be able to save what was there? And if
I
that,
just want they're gonna do this reshoot, and it's gonna have the ending that all the people were telling them it should have, and they're never going to admit that they had five other endings that were all horrible and were panned by every test audience they showed it to. You know, they're never going to admit it. So you know what? When people say, "Oh no, we intended this all along," I want to see all the footage. It's just like the whole thing with Snyder. Don't say he had a whole other movie filmed or the movie was complete when you know that it was just almost 6 hours. It was 6 hours of footage shot that they hadn't even pieced together to make a film. And remember, Lucas had a much longer for original Star Wars. New Hope was much longer. He had a lot of footage, and none of the editors could figure out how to get it until they got the right guy, and his wife came in and helped them start editing it and changing the pace. You know,
which is something that Dave was talking about that they may need to do with the Mandalorian, just on some of these episodes, the pacing. Had they taken episode 1 and 2 and split it or changed the story just enough, I think the flow would have been a lot better for that first episode.
I mean, just from the changes I said, right? Because if you have the meeting with Bo and you have that first episode end with Mando arriving at Mandalore, right? Then technically in this episode, in episode 2, you would hit the midpoint. You would barely be at the midpoint of the episode when Bo Katan's showing up and is rescuing Din. When you do that, you could spend much more of the episode of them exploring the ruins of Mandalore, potentially encountering other items, or because maybe Bo has some idea of what that weird robot thing was, right? And we could have gotten a little bit more of a history or an explanation or something about it, right? That's where we could have seen more of the depths of Mandalore on their way to the pool, right? It would have freed up that time and that space instead of rehashing Din going to the armor and saying, "Hey, I need to go take a bath," right? If you just eliminate those 10 minutes, it frees another 10 minutes elsewhere that you could spend on something that would be a little bit better for that part of the story.
And George Lucas had a way to work around the time jumps, and it was called the scroll. He would fill in the story, and that little thing that would start at the beginning of the movie. You wouldn't have to worry about having to put things in to help people understand time has passed. You could say it in a 2-minute long thing and then pick up from where that point ends. Okay, this all happened. He trained with Luke for 2 years while Mando was doing all these other things, and then now they've all come back together again. And then here's where the story starts. Do something like that, because I know they think that showing a city that was once a shithole in Luke's time on Tatooine, Mos Eisley, and then showing it as this big, massive, beautiful, prosperous city, that doesn't happen overnight. Just like that, even Luke trying to travel back to traveling to Yavin when they jumped, it still took a while for them to get there, and for the Death Star. Some people believe, oh man, it only took them a few minutes because you're flying it in
a couple hours.
hyper speed and you get there. Well, I'm sorry, I don't even think the Death Star can travel in hyperspeed. I mean, just think about how many space whales that they took out if they went into hyperspace. So there is a natural progression of time that you have to realize it takes you. It's like in 24, they have 24 hours for this show, for the whole series, and they've got to get across Los Angeles to get somewhere. Have you ever driven in Los Angeles in rush hour traffic? That's half your show just showing them sitting in a car.
Yeah, 8 hours down, you only have.
So we have to have people who understand that time does pass, and sometimes you can show it visually, like is what I believe Favreau was trying to do. But there are some people that's not enough. You have to give them some kind of, and it's not monologuing. What is it? It's the other word. Where you kind of have to explain to them what's going on. Expedition dumps, yeah.
Exposition.
Exposition. I said expedition.
So 3 things that I don't remember one of them. One of them was a comment on David's, but the one thing about, you think about it, right? This season is 8 episodes, and we know they pulled 2 episodes from Mandalorian
Boba
Fett, because that means that there's probably 2 episodes that we didn't get from the Mandalorian that were, Boba Fett, that were so bad that
that terrifies me.
It does. Yeah, that does terrify you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because what on Andor was 10 episodes?
Well, and since doesn't the book of Boba Fett take place in Mos Eisley for the majority part of it?
Mos Eisley and Mos Vespa or something, or
yeah, and in that time the huts are driven out, and the other guys, the people turned on there towards the end. And he turned that in place into a big prosperous planet with lots of trade and everything else, right? So he must be not doing too bad as a leader.
Well, so yeah, there wasn't too much I didn't like about this episode, other than, like I said, the darkness was a little bit much. And if you don't have a good TV, like I have a good TV, but man, that was really dark. There should have been a little bit more.
And that some of that's got to be used to hide the flaws in the effects.
Well, no, either the flaws in the effects, or because of the fact that the budget is so low, they had to cheap out this episode because it would have been a little bit more visually appealing.
They blew their budget on the turtle gator.
Which, again, that brings me back to the whole thing of how you take the first part of episode 1 and you could have put it at the end of this episode of having him and Bo-Katan showing up, blowing the turtle away, and then it could have left at the end with them going, hey, starting to say something, that he's already completed his quest. Instead of having him retread his path about having her tell him where he needs to go so he can redeem.
You got to go wash yourself in the lake of Lake Minnetonka. Got to get
it's always about the soap.
Yeah,
that's right.
It's just about pacing, but this episode is really good. Really good pacing. Really great character moments. We got to see Grogu really shine. This episode, we actually got to see him not be the child. He was a little bit more mature
Sure. Yeah.
this episode. He knew what he
And
needed to do.
you got to see that a Mandalorian can eat soup without taking their helmet off.
He was all like this.
I mean, that takes perfect aim, because would you want that hot soup pouring on your face inside that helmet?
You know
And
what?
then you got to take it off to clean it up.
You know
Oh,
what?
shit, I got to do it again.
That reminds me, right? I'm still very upset about one aspect of the show that I commented about, because the big question we didn't talk about in the episode, talked about it post episode last time, but like the big question I wanted to know was he going to strip down all the way down except for the mask whenever he had to go wash himself, right? And that's what I was expecting. I was like, no, he's got to be buck naked except for the helmet going into the water. And instead, he's like, no, I don't want to get my cloak wet, and I got to set my jetpack.
Well, his
Yeah, my
jetpack, he
jetpack
took
down.
off he took off the gun, he took off the dark saber, and then left the ammo pouch thing on his leg. You know, those
Yeah.
round ammo bomb things
Yeah.
that they use. I was like, well, aren't those going to get damaged if they get wet?
See, I would have thought. I mean, I'm with David. Wouldn't he have taken his armor off to bathe in it? Because did he really bathe in it? If he's wearing
it would have
armor?
been great
count?
if when he took everything
count?
off, if he took everything off and he was standing there with his helmet and a pair of Darth Maul underoos,
There you go.
and then walk
but
into
look,
the
No,
water.
no.
Look,
It has
hey,
to be. It has
everybody-
to be heart boxers like Arthur from Ghosts and Goblins.
Look, everybody's always talking about inclusivity, right? And I think that the women deserved a little flash of Pedro, right? That's what this episode needed to really put it over the top for everybody involved. We're all about inclusivity here. That's what was required. So Disney missed the mark.
Let's just not say little Pedro.
Little Pedro. And little Pedro in his helmet.
Bo-Katan needed a little bit of that too. You know, she's been lonely for a while. You know,
But here's another question. Damn it, just went right out of my head as I was about to say it. We were talking. Oh,
Yeah, speaking out of
is Pedro kind of pigeonholing himself? I mean, we've got him playing a father figure in The Last of Us. We now have him playing a father figure in Star Wars. Is that going to be his thing? His
no. It's orphans. He can't. It's not like he's
and it's orphans.
It's orphans.
I mean, is he going to take the come on, the actor who played Qui-Gon Jinn? Yeah, Liam Neeson. Is he going to take that kind of a role where his daughter and every member of his family gets kidnapped, and he's got to make a phone call to threaten them and then show up and then kill them in interesting and fun ways?
Yeah, but who does he show up as? Does he show up as the Mandalorian, or does he show up as Joel?
No, he's going to show up as Burt Reynolds. Let's get that.
He's going to be the Joel Lorian.
Joel Lorian.
There you go.
See, if Mel Brooks did this instead of doing whatever he's doing in History of the World, he could have made Star Wars so great. Could you imagine Mando flying through space in a Trans Am, or the Firebird with the big flame on it, with instead of Sally Field, it's Grogu sitting next to him, and then later on they team up with a really big fat guy who is like Dom DeLuise's character, Captain Chaos, but he would be one of the misunderstood Jabba the Hutt family, and he could have what's his name play the voice of him, or actually be him. The Pick of Destiny. Come on, why can't I think of names? Jack Black could be the sidekick. He could be the new Captain Chaos. I mean, you could get at least 3 movies out of that.
So he was already flying a space Winnebago. Now he's flying. What would this be? This would be a Trans Am.
All they need to do is paint the Trans Am flames on the front of that thing, and we have
the space Corvette. Yeah,
Smoking the Bandit.
I just want to see a scene where he runs to the ship and slides atop the cockpit into the sea. He can be Tom Selleck. He can be the next FBI.
The Duke boys are at it again.
All right. Any last thoughts, guys? Because we're derailing here.
No, I want to hear. Did y'all have any scene in it that you didn't like? Not you, David. You've already said it. I'm trying to point at Colin. Was there anything you didn't like?
No,
So
no.
you didn't like anything, but you didn't like a whole lot. You thought it was okay.
Yeah, it's just,
Okay.
you know,
Just middle of the road for you.
yeah.
What?
Right now it's just middle of the road because you got to remember I haven't seen the first two seasons, so I'm still trying to adapt to everything. So
What's
I'm
going
not
on?
Who are
I'm
these
not trying to
people?
deep dive
What
into
is
any
Baby
part of
Yoda?
it.
So
Well,
what it is there's not enough Twi'lek dancers in this season.
well, I was going to say the one thing I can't stand is the little holes. The little didn't quite think it through. All right, so we have him going and looking for IG-11,
Oh,
right?
that's the
Who
little
we saw in the first season sacrificed himself for Grogu and for Din by opening up his chest and pulling out a thermal detonator. Chest, you know? And when it blew up, he was in all these little bitty pieces. Then all of a sudden, we come here and they made a statue out of him, Rocky S statue. And his whole chest cavity and everything is whole, even his head. Only his arms and legs got blown off. I just, come on.
Hey,
Were
well,
you drinking
hold
when
on,
y'all did that?
hold on, because if we're going to talk about that, we talk about the homage that was going on with that episode, was this Terminator 1, and the fact when Kyle Reese stuck that pipe bomb inside the Terminator's little gut thing with the area, it exploded, but it left the top chassis and one arm. So
Yeah.
it's very okay. I get it. Maybe the thermal detonator isn't as powerful as it was, or the thermal detonator didn't have enough impact because it was an old thermal detonator. Maybe the components were going bad.
Maybe he got it wet.
Yeah, he got it wet. Maybe because it was in lava. He was partially cased in lava, so it didn't blow him up as much.
Well, see, that's why Din needed him, is because he knew that he'd already been and bathed in the waters of Mandalore, and he didn't take that detonator out. That's
Yep.
what happened.
Yeah, he didn't get that +10 to every element.
So, like Achilles, instead of his mother picking him up and holding him by his ankles and dipping him in that water that made him invulnerable, somebody dipped a IG-11 from the top down and hadn't put his arms on yet, so they weren't protected in there and brought him back out. So
That's right.
Pulled him by his left leg.
So, and that goes to the whole question here is the fact that he was going on a quest to find the part for IG-11, got sidetracked, got a new droid, but we know that because it was such a big deal that he's going to find the part to rebuild IG-11. We just don't know when. Now, that begs to differ. Is it going to be one of those things where it'd be kind of cool if he runs into IG-88? IG-8 has a spare of these because he needs them just in case anything goes wrong with him. So he has backups. He maybe goes talk to Boba Fett. He goes, yeah, I have a friend who
I
might
think he wanted somebody who could fight just as hard as he did to be
He
his
said he
partner.
needed him for spelunking.
spurlunk.
Yes, Spurlunk. I need him to. And did IG-11 ever look like he could spurlunk? Go spelunking. All that detailed and stuff, kind of climbing and everything, and he's got arms that only bend at the elbow. And I don't think they have rockets on their feet like our two units do.
Well, remember, R2 used the fuel for those rockets back in episode 3, and that's why Lucas claims he never had that ability through the rest of the original trilogy. So when Leia and the rebels rebuild him and he's all boop, 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 they didn't refill the oil in that to
That it was that
the technology just not there anymore. Sorry, that we're going into
fossil fuels. They got expensive at the time, and the diesel or whatever fluid they were using to ignite it was just too expensive for them.
But no, I mean it was a good episode, very good episode. I'm looking forward to the next episode. I want to know, if what's going to happen. And it felt like there was some tension building up between Din and Bo-Katan, like they were having some romantic kind of thing a little bit. So who knows?
You just want him to shtick, so then there's a baby Mando running around with a tiny helmet on. It'd be like Boss Baby with a
Well, no, that's
Mandalorian helmet.
Let's not say little. Let's not say little Mando with a helmet.
Well, and again, I think it's less romantic, right? And it's more of just it's two creature. It's a creature of destiny. It's the unstoppable force meeting the immovable object, right? Of what's going on. It's she's staring at her destiny, and he's
his dark saber.
That's right.
She's staring at
his dark saber.
That's going to be mine. Yeah, that's what she's thinking.
Vinny, I sent you a text.
She already showed you how well she can wield it, so.
And she's really handy.
That's right.
And if those innuendos don't get caught, well, that's not my problem.
Innuendos.
Rectum. Practically killed him.
That's a good concept. Do you want me to bring that up?
If you want, that's my thought on it.
So Colin thinks that Bo's going to die, and that'll be the catalyst that changes Din. Could be.
Could be. It'd be a waste of a good character.
They keep going back to her, but nobody knows who's going to do what and everything like that. Well, I think that's going to be the catalyst.
Or it could be the armorer that dies. If the armorer dies, who's the leader of the watch, they don't have a leader. So Bo and Din could step in for that.
Or Din's the one who dies.
I'm right? Just
it's the catalyst to convert those of the way.
Yeah.
Oh, so we've gone full circle with the.
People are stealing catalyst converters all the time.
All the time, catalyst converters,
But I mean, that's just it, right? Right now, like I said, that's the most interesting aspect of the show at the moment is we know in general that there is a vacuum of leadership.
Yeah.
We know one person that wants the leadership, one person that doesn't, but the person that doesn't has the thing that the person that does needs in order to achieve it. Mm-hmm. So at some point, something's going to come to a head, and it's either going to be the two of them fighting. It's going to be an outside force acting on them, being the ones of the watch, forcing that, right? And that's where it's going to turn into the question of who's going to instigate the fight, how is that fight going to play out, and whose sacrifice is it going to be that's going to change and band them all together. And maybe there isn't a sacrifice. Maybe the pirates that got introduced in episode 1.
So they're going to come back. They've got to come back.
They're going to come back.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, too. What if they do become romantically attached? They do go together. Then that means that they both have the dark saber through the marriage.
Sure.
So I think what would be really good is to have a twist where we find out that the armorer isn't who she pretends to be.
And she could. That's what I was bringing up earlier.
Because there were a lot when that Civil War happened. There were a lot of people who betrayed each other, and what better way to hide?
The whole time.
Well, I originally thought the best way they could end this was to have never shown Din Djarin's head, and at the end he takes off the helmet and he's got a green face with long ears, and you find out that he goes, "Grogu, I am your father."
I want to see him take it off and have a giant afro pop out.
Or the haircut that Splinter has in the new Turtles cartoon.
Oh, no.
Yeah, the Frohawk.
No.
Frohawk, yeah. Stay tuned for that episode, guys.
Let's call it a mulligan.
But yeah, no. We're going off the rails. So last thoughts, guys. Ready for next episode next week?
Yeah.
Why not?
Make a prediction. I want everybody to make a prediction for the next episode. What do you think
I just made mine.
We're going to see?
You
think
I think Bo-Katan's going to die. I don't know if it's going to be the next episode, but I think she's going to die.
Well, no, I'm talking, what do you think we'll see in the next episode? Just one thing.
That's what he said. That's his thought.
My prediction.
Okay, so you want her to die in the next episode?
No, I don't want her to die, but I think that's what's going to happen. It could. Maybe it won't be this one, but it's possible. They're starting to show her a little too much, and they're starting to create something
You're
between
starting to
them.
you're
It's
starting
got
to
to
get
be
that
that
she's 3
heroic.
days away from retirement vibe.
Yeah,
I'm getting too
it's
old
got to
for
be.
this.
It's got to be that twist that the hero gets, the Spider-Man factor.
The fridging is what you're waiting for. So what I think is again what I've said before, right? Is there's a confrontation coming. I think that in this next episode, we're going to see the genesis of that. Either when they're getting ready to leave, is when some members of the Watch are showing up, or maybe the pirates show up on Mandalore. Someone is going to show up that's going to begin pressing the confrontation between Mando and Bo, I think, right? Or at least they're going to start stoking the fires a little bit more as it moves along. So, like I said, it's either going to be the Watch or it's going to be the pirates are going to be out there waiting at the Naboo fighter as they're leaving out, and they're and it's gonna cause
The
that
Naboo fighter
conflict
isn't
to
there.
grow. Huh?
The Naboo
The
fighter
Naboo
isn't there.
fighter's
Oh,
not
I'm
there.
sorry. Whatever.
Left. Yeah.
Whatever.
Starship is
They're
there.
going to go out
And
to the
I
ship.
really want to. I wouldn't want to make Bo-Katan angry when it's her car.
Yeah,
It's a long walk.
it is.
Yeah. I would think that if I was the Imperials, at least the remnants of that we know that Thrawn's going to be the leader of, that there would have been beacons set up or some kind of signal set up that would alert them if some Mandalore or something came to the waters where they needed to bathe. And this is going to alert the Empire, what's left of it, to come here. And we could start seeing the threat, because we need something that at this point, since the journey's complete, we need the what the main villain of the show is going to be, at least show its hand in this next episode.
I agree with that. I think we'll see the actual villain in the next episode because it's episode 3. Again, David might be right. The pirates could show up, but they don't know he's there. And if they're trying to track his ship, that's not on the planet. So I don't know why they would even show up
read
there.
it, but remember, they couldn't read it. But you think the fact that there could be, even though their radio signals can't be beamed through at least the area there are on the planet, that doesn't mean that relays couldn't be set up to beam on a section that the Empire set up to push a signal through.
Yeah.
Like where the storm is.
My counter argument to all the shit that you just said is the magical tracking device from season 1 that allowed that bounty hunter to find Grogu. Doesn't matter. It's dumb, stupid space magic. We're in Space Magic the show. If they need the pirates to show up, then magical bullshit reason pirates will show up, right? That's why I'm saying I lean less towards the pirates and I lean more towards the Watch showing up.
Let's leave Eileen out of it.
Huh?
Let's leave Eileen out of it.
He quit picking on Eileen.
Yeah. Jane, ignorant.
Surely you understand that Eileen has nothing to do with this.
Guys, I picked the wrong day to stop sniffing glue if y'all are going to start that up.
Yep.
All right, everyone. So we hope you enjoyed this episode of us breaking down Mandalorian Season 3, Episode 2. Stay tuned for next week. We will be doing another breakdown, more deep dive lore and everything as we do. And until then, this is the way.